Welcome to my latest video where I'm shaking things up and bringing you something new and different. Today, I'll be delving into a 75-year-old mystery that has recently been declared solved, but still holds many unanswered questions. So, sit back and get ready as we embark on this intriguing journey together. The book. Despite intense public interest, the man's identity, cause of death, and the circumstances leading up to it remain unknown, as does the meaning of the mysterious code. The case of the Summerton Man has fascinated people for decades, with its web of intrigue and unanswered questions. The man's body was discovered on December 1st, 1948, and despite an extensive investigation, the authorities were unable to identify him. The discovery of the Tamam Shud paper, torn from a book of Persian poetry, added to the mystery, as did the cryptic message found inside the book. The message, which has never been deciphered, appeared to be a code or cipher, leading many to speculate that the man was involved in espionage or other covert activity. The use of an undetectable poison was also suggested, as the cause of death remained unknown. The case gained further notoriety due to its timing, occurring at the height of the Cold War and a time of heightened international tension. The possibility that the Summerton Man was a spy, or that his death was somehow connected to international politics, only added to the intrigue. In 2022, a breakthrough in the case was announced, as a professor and genealogist claimed to have identified the man as Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer and instrument maker born in 1905. This identification was made using DNA from the man's hair, and if verified, could finally put an end to the mystery of the Summerton Man's identity. However, the claim has not yet been confirmed by authorities, leaving the case as enigmatic as ever. On December 1st, 1948, the body of a man was found on Summerton Park Beach in Adelaide, South Australia. The man was lying in the sand with his head resting against the seawall and his legs extended with his feet crossed. An unlit cigarette was found on the right collar of his coat, and a search of his pockets revealed various items including a half-empty packet of juicy fruit, chewing gum, an Army Club cigarette packet containing 7 cigarettes of a different brand, Conceited, and a quarter-full box of Bryant and May matches. Witnesses who had seen an individual resembling the dead man on the evening of November 30th said that they had seen him extend his right arm to its fullest extent and then drop it limply. Another couple who saw him from 7:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. recounted that they did not see him move during the half hour in which he was in view, although they did have the impression that his position had changed. The man was of Britisher appearance, thought to be aged about 40-45, and in top physical condition. He was dressed in a white shirt, a red, white, and blue tie, brown trousers, socks and shoes, a brown knitted pullover, and a fashionable gray and brown double-breasted jacket of reportedly American tailoring. All labels on his clothes had been removed, and he had no hat or wallet. The man carried no identification, which led police to believe he had committed suicide. The autopsy was conducted, and the pathologist estimated the time of death at around 2 a.m. on December 1st. The pathologist concluded that I am quite convinced the death could not have been natural. The poison I suggested was a barbiturate or a soluble hypnotic. Although poisoning remained a prime suspicion, the pasty that the man had eaten about 3 to 4 hours before death was not believed to be the source. The coroner was unable to reach a conclusion as to the man's identity, cause of death, or whether the man seen alive at Summerton Beach on the evening of November 30th was the same man, as nobody had seen his face at that time. This passage describes the contents of a brown suitcase that was found at the Adelaide railway station in 1949, which was believed to belong to the man found dead on Summerton Beach. The label had been removed from the suitcase, but it contained various items of clothing, including a red check dressing gown, a pair of red felt slippers, underpants, pajamas, and trousers with sand in the cuff. There were also several items that could be used as weapons, such as a knife, scissors, and a screwdriver, as well as a small square of zinc that may have been used to protect the knife and scissors. Police found the name T. Keane on a tie, a laundry bag, and a singlet in the suitcase, as well as 3 dry cleaning marks. However, a search for a T. Keane who was missing in any English-speaking country proved fruitless. The clothing tags had been removed, but the Keane tags were left on the clothes, leading police to suspect that they had been deliberately left by the owner of the suitcase to mislead investigators. Despite their investigations, police were unable to determine the identity of the man found on the beach or the owner of the suitcase. They believed that the man had arrived at the Adelaide railway station by overnight train from either Melbourne, Sydney or Port Augusta, and had showered and shaved at the adjacent city baths before checking his suitcase. at the station cloakroom and catching a city bus to Glen Elk. However, it is unclear why he did not board the 10:50 a.m. train to Henley Beach as planned. The death of the unidentified man found on Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia in 1948 remains a mystery to this day. The investigating pathologist, Thomas Erskine Cleland, conducted an inquest into the man's death and speculated that the man may have died elsewhere and been brought to the beach. He also noted that the man's shoes were remarkably clean, which did not match the condition expected of a man who had supposedly been wandering around all day. Cedric Stanton Hicks, a professor of physiology and pharmacology at the University of Adelaide, testified that the man may have died from a toxic dose of a drug in the cardiac glycoside group, specifically digitalis and wabane. He noted that a small oral dose of these drugs could be fatal and difficult to identify. Hicks also stated that the lack of evidence of vomiting and convulsion, the two main physiological reactions to poison, may indicate that the man was already dead when he was brought to the beach. Despite these findings, the cause of the man's death could not be determined. Cleland speculated that if the body had been carried to the beach, then all the difficulties in determining the cause of death would disappear. After the inquest, a plaster cast was made of the man's head and shoulders. The mystery of the Somerton man's death remains one of Australia's most enduring unsolved cases. The third line of the code has been the subject of much speculation and debate among cryptographers and amateur sleuths. The line reads MZFPK. Some have suggested that this might be a substitution cipher, where each letter in the code corresponds to a different letter in the plaintext message. However, no one has been able to come up with a satisfactory solution to the code, and it remains unsolved to this day. The fourth line of the code reads NBAIQOMUIAGAR, and is also believed to be some kind of encrypted message. The letters in the code do not appear to follow any recognizable pattern, and no one has been able to decode it. Some have suggested that the code may have been written using a one-time path, a method of encryption where a random key is used to encrypt and decrypt messages. If this is the case, it would be nearly impossible to decode the message without the key. Despite numerous attempts to solve the code, it remains one of the most enduring mysteries of the Tamam Shud case. Many have speculated that the code may hold the key to unlocking the identity of the Somerton man and the circumstances surrounding his death. But for now, the meaning of the code remains a mystery. There have been several attempts to decode the mysterious lines of text found in the book. Initial attempts by code experts and amateurs were unsuccessful. In 1978, cryptographers from the Department of Defense analyzed the text, but concluded that it would be impossible to provide a satisfactory answer due to the text's brevity and lack of sufficient symbols for a clear meaning to be extracted. In 2004, retired detective Jerry Feltus suggested that the final line ITTMTSAMSTGAB could stand for the initials of its time to move to South Australia Mosley Street. In 2009 to 2011, Derek Abbott's team concluded that each letter was most likely the first letter of a word. In 2014, computational linguist John Rehling analyzed the text and found strong evidence to support the theory that the letters consist of the initials of some English text, but no match for these in a large survey of literature. He concludes that the letters were likely written as a form of shorthand, not as a code, and that the original text can likely never be determined. The case of the Somerton man is a mystery that has remained unsolved for decades. One of the key figures in the case is Jessica Ellen Jo Thompson, a nurse who lived in the same suburb where the body was found. Thompson's phone number was found in a book that was discovered on the body of the unidentified man. When questioned by police, Thompson claimed not to know the dead man or why he would have her number. However, Thompson did report that an unidentified man had attempted to visit her late in 1948, asking her next-door neighbor about her. Jerry Feltus, a researcher who later interviewed Thompson, believed that she knew the identity of the Somerton man but was being evasive or did not want to talk about it. Thompson requested that police not keep a permanent record of her name or release her details to third parties, which hampered later investigations. Thompson's real name was considered important because it may be the decryption key for a purported code that was found in the book on the body of the Somerton man. Thompson claimed to have owned a copy of the book, The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, which she had given to an Australian Army lieutenant named Alf Boxall in 1945. She said that after the war, she had received a letter from Boxall and had replied, telling him that she was now married. Police initially suspected that Boxall was the dead man, but he was found alive in Sydney with the final page of his copy of the Rubaiyat intact. The words Tamam Shud, which were also found on a scrap of paper in the book found on the body of the Somerton man, were still in place in Boxall's book. There is no evidence that Boxall had any contact with Thompson after 1945. The case remains unsolved, and the identity of the Somerton man and the meaning of the code in the book remain a mystery. Indeed, repentance oft before. I swore, but was I sober when I swore? And then came spring, and rose in hand. My threadbare penitence of pieces tore. The case of the unidentified man found dead on Somerton Beach in 1948 has generated numerous identifications over the year, but none have been definitively proven. Early on, a man named E.C. Johnson identified himself as the likely victim, but his fingerprints did not match those of the deceased. Other identifications included a man named Robert Walsh, a missing station worker, a worker on a steamship, and a Swedish man, among others. Victoria detectives believed the man was from their state due to similarities in laundry mark, but none of the 28 people who claimed to know his identity were able to prove it. By November 1953, police had received 251 potential solutions to the man's identity, but the only valuable clue remained the clothing he wore. Despite these efforts, the case remains unsolved and the man's identity and cause of death remain a mystery. The death of 2-year-old Clive Magnusson and the subsequent events surrounding it were also investigated in relation to the Somerton man case. On June 6, 1949, Clive's body was found in a sack in the Largs Bay Sandhills, about 20 kilometers from where the Somerton man's body was discovered. His father, Keith Waldemar Magnusson, was found lying next to him, unconscious and suffering from exposure. The father was taken to a hospital and later transferred to a mental hospital after a medical examination. The police believed that Clive had been dead for 24 hours when his body was found, but the cause of death could not be determined. After the death of her son, Roma Magnusson reported being threatened by a masked man who almost ran her down outside her home in Largs North while driving a battered cream car. The man told her to stay away from the police or face the consequences. Magnusson believed that this threat was related to her husband's attempt to identify the Somerton man as Carl Thompson, with whom he had worked in Renmark in 1939. Magnusson collapsed and required medical treatment soon after being interviewed by the police over her harassment. J.M. Gower, secretary of the Largs North Progress Association, and Al Curtis, the acting mayor of Port Adelaide, received anonymous phone calls threatening them not to interfere in the Magnusson case. Police suspected that the caller might be the same person who had terrorized a woman in a nearby suburb who had recently lost her husband in tragic circumstances. The case also received media coverage in various countries, including the United States, United Kingdom, and New Zealand. The media coverage helped to raise public awareness of the case and generated many leads and tips, but none of them led to a positive identification of the Somerton man. The mystery surrounding the case and the inability to identify the man captured the imagination of people around the world and has led to many theories and speculations about his identity and the circumstances of his death. The case remains unsolved to this day and continues to fascinate and intrigue people all over the world. In 1949, an unknown man was buried in Adelaide's West Terrace Cemetery, and years later, flowers began appearing on his grave. Police questioned a woman leaving the cemetery, but she claimed not to know him. The receptionist at the Strathmore Hotel revealed that a man had stayed there a few days before the death and checked out on the 30th of November 1948. In 1994, Chief Justice of Victoria and Chairman of the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine, John Harbour Phillips, reviewed the case and concluded that the cause of death was digitalis. Len Brown, former South Australian Chief Superintendent who worked on the case in the 1940s, believed that the man was from a country in the Warsaw Pact, making it difficult for the police to identify him. There has been speculation that the man was a spy due to the circumstances of his death, including the proximity to spy sites and a reorganization of Australian security agencies. Boxall, who was reportedly involved in intelligence work during and immediately after World War II, is also linked to the espionage theory. In 2011, an Adelaide woman contacted biological anthropologist Maciej Henneberg about an identification card of an H.C. Reynolds that she found in her father's possessions. The card was given to Henneberg for comparison to the Somerton man. While the ear shapes shared by both men were a very good match, Henneberg also found a mole on the cheek that was in the same position in both photographs, which he believed would allow him to positively identify the Somerton man. The case of the Somerton man, also known as the Tamam Shud case, has been investigated extensively by Professor Derek Abbott and his team at the University of Adelaide. In 2009, they attempted to crack the code found in a copy of the ruby, believed to have been owned by the Somerton man. They also proposed exhuming the body to test for DNA, as well as comparing copies of the Ruby, the Talmud, and the Bible to the code using computers to get a statistical base for letter frequencies. The investigation has also led to questions about the assumptions made by police in the original investigation. The autopsy reports of 1948 and 1949 are now missing, and the Barr-Smith Library's collection of Cleland's notes do not contain anything on the case. In May 2009, Abbott consulted with dental experts who concluded that the Summerton man had a rare genetic disorder called hypodontia of both lateral incisors. In June 2010, Abbott obtained a photograph of Jessica Thompson's eldest son, Robin, which showed that he had the same rare ear features and hypodontia as the Summerton man. This has led to speculation that Robin Thompson may have been the son of either Vauxhall or the Summerton man and passed off as Prosper Thompson's son. DNA testing would confirm or eliminate this speculation. In December 2017, Abbott announced that 3 excellent hairs had been found on the plaster cast of the corpse and had been submitted for DNA analysis. The results of the analysis could take up to a year to process. In February 2018, the University of Adelaide team obtained a high-definition analysis of the mitochondrial DNA from the hair sample, which revealed that the Summerton man belonged to haplogroup H4A1A, possessed by only 1% of European. However, mitochondrial DNA is only inherited through the maternal line, so it cannot be used to investigate a hereditary link between Abbott's wife and the Summerton man. Based on the information provided, it appears that the man known as the Summerton man has been identified as Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer and instrument maker born on the 16th of November 1905 in Footscray, a suburb of Melbourne. Through investigative genetic genealogy, matches were found for descendants of 2 distant cousins of Webb, both on the paternal and on the maternal side. Webb was a solitary man who had few friends, enjoyed betting on horses, and had serious mental health issues. He had a troubled marriage, which ended in separation in 1947. Webb's family had no knowledge of him after his disappearance, and it is believed that he committed suicide by poisoning himself. The coded messages found in the pocket of his clothing could be horse names, given his interest in horse racing.